The sun hung low over the endless expanse of desert, painting the sand and scattered rocks in shades of burnt orange and deep crimson. Wind whistled through the sparse vegetation, carrying with it the taste of dust and the promise of another scorching day ahead. In the distance, the small town of Copper Creek sat like a weathered scar on the landscape, its wooden buildings bleached gray by years of unforgiving sun and sandstorms. Jake Sullivan pulled his hat lower over his eyes as he guided his horse down the main street. At 42, his face bore the map of a hard life, deep lines etched by sun and sorrow, a scar running from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone, and eyes the color of winter sky that had seen too much. His shoulders, broad beneath a dust-covered duster coat, carried themselves with the weight of a man who had learned to expect little from life and even less from people. The town was typical of 100 others scattered across the territory, a general store with warped boards and faded lettering, a blacksmith's shop sending sparks into the dying light, and, at the heart of it all, the Broken Wheel Saloon. It was there Jake headed, his spurs jangling with each measured step as he tied his horse to the hitching post. Inside, the air hung thick with tobacco smoke and the sour smell of spilled whiskey. Men clustered around scarred tables, their conversations a low rumble punctuated by the clink of glasses and occasional bursts of harsh laughter. Jake made his way to the bar, nodding to Tom. The barkeep, a mountain of a man with arms like tree trunks and a face that discouraged questions. "Whiskey," Jake said, his voice rough from trail dust. Tom poured without comment, sliding the glass across the sticky bar surface. Jake had just raised it to his lips when the saloon doors swung open, bringing with them a gust of evening air and something else trouble. She stood in the doorway like a ghost materialized from the desert itself. Her dress, once perhaps blue or green, had faded to an indeterminate gray, torn at the hem and stained with the evidence of hard travel. Dark hair, tangled and dusty, framed a face that might have been beautiful if not for the haunted look in her eyes that darted around the room like a trapped animal seeking escape. The saloon fell silent. Every man turned to stare at this apparition, a young woman, alone, in a place where decent women didn't venture. She couldn't have been more than 25, Jake estimated, though whatever she'd been through had aged her beyond her years. "Well, well," drawled a voice from one of the tables. "What have we here?" The speaker was Bill Hawkins, a local tough who made his living through intimidation and petty theft. He rose from his chair, a predatory smile spreading across his pockmarked face. "You lost, little lady. Or maybe you're looking for work. I'm sure we could find something suitable for you." The woman's chin lifted slightly, a spark of defiance flickering in those desperate eyes. "I need food," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And water. I can work for it." Hawkins laughed, an ugly sound that made Jake's jaw tighten. "Oh, I bet you can work, sweetheart. Question is, what kind of work are you offering?" The other men joined in the laughter, and the woman took a step backward, her hand reaching for the door frame as if to steady herself. Jake could see her swaying slightly exhaustion, hunger, or both. "Please," she said, and now her voice cracked. "I just need—" "Get out!" Tom's voice boomed from behind the bar. "We don't serve your kind here. This is a respectable establishment." "Respectable?" The woman's laugh was bitter, brittle. "In a town like this—" Hawkins moved closer, and two of his cronies rose to join him. "You heard the man. Time to leave, unless you'd like us to escort you out, personally." Jake watched it all unfold, his whiskey untouched. He'd seen this scene play out before, the strong preying on the weak, the cruel finding sport in another's misery. He'd told himself long ago to stop caring, to mind his own business. The world was hard enough without taking on other people's troubles. But something in the woman's eyes, that mixture of fear and stubborn pride, stirred something he'd thought long dead. Maybe it was the way she stood her ground despite trembling. Maybe it was the dignity she clung to, even as the wolves circled. "The lady asked for food and water," Jake said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Not your commentary, Hawkins." Every eye in the saloon turned to him. Hawkins's face darkened, his hand moving instinctively toward the gun at his hip. "This ain't your concern. Sullivan, best you stay out of it?" Jake turned slowly, setting his glass down with deliberate care. "Made it my concern when you started surrounding a woman who can barely stand. That how you prove you're a man these days? Bill ganging up on someone who probably hasn't eaten in days." "She's just another drifter," someone muttered. Probably a what?" Jake's voice dropped to a dangerous quiet. "Go on. Finish that thought. I'm real curious to hear what you think gives you the right to judge." The saloon held its breath. Jake Sullivan had a reputation not as a fast gun, though he was quick enough, but as a man who, once pushed, didn't stop pushing back. Most folks in Copper Creek gave him a wide berth, content to let him drink alone and leave town when his business was done. Hawkins's fingers drummed against his gun belt, calculating. 3 against 1 seemed like good odds, but Sullivan had survived range wars, Indian raids, and worse. The question was whether a stranger woman was worth the risk. "You want to play hero. Sullivan, fine." Hawkins spat on the floor. "But don't come crying when she robs you blind or worse. These kind always got secrets, always running from something." "Then that makes 2 of us," Jake replied evenly. "Difference is, I'm not running anymore." He turned to the woman, who had watched the exchange with wide eyes. "There's a boarding house 2 streets over. Ma Foster runs a clean place, serves decent food. Tell her Jake Sullivan sent you and that I'll settle the bill in the morning." The woman stared at him, suspicion warring with desperate need in her expression. "Why?" The single word carried the weight of someone who'd learned that kindness always came with a price. "Because someone should have done it for me once," Jake said simply, and didn't. She hesitated another moment, then nodded a quick, sharp movement. "Thank you," she whispered, and turned toward the door. "This ain't over. Sullivan!" Hawkins called after them. "You just bought yourself a heap of trouble." Jake picked up his whiskey and downed it in one burning swallow. "Wouldn't be the first time," he said, and followed the woman out into the deepening twilight. Outside, she had stopped a few feet from the saloon, swaying more pronounced now. Jake caught her elbow as she stumbled. "When's the last time you ate?" he asked. 3 days, she admitted. "Maybe 4. I lost count." He cursed under his breath. "Come on, let's get you to Ma Foster's before you collapse. This town's got enough ghosts without adding another." As they walked slowly down the dusty street, Jake found himself wondering what he'd just gotten himself into. The woman beside him was clearly running from something or someone. In his experience, that kind of trouble had a way of catching up, usually at the worst possible moment. But for now, she needed help, and despite everything he'd told himself about staying uninvolved, he couldn't walk away. Maybe it was those eyes holding pain but not yet broken. Maybe it was just that he was tired of being the kind of man who could walk away. The boarding house appeared before them, yellow light spilling from its windows like a promise of warmth and safety. Tomorrow would bring its own problems. Hawkins wouldn't let the insult slide, and whoever this woman was running from might still be following. But tonight, at least, she'd have a roof over her head and food in her belly. In a world as hard as theirs, sometimes that was the best anyone could hope for. As Jake knocked on Ma Foster's door, he caught the woman looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read, gratitude mixed with something else. Fear. Warning. "I'm Clara," she said suddenly. "Clara Morrison. I thought you should know. In case..." "In case what?" But Ma Foster was already opening the door, her round face creasing with concern at the sight of them. And Clara's answer, if she'd meant to give one, was lost in the bustle of getting her inside and settled. Walking back to his camp outside town, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that this chance encounter in a dusty saloon was about to change everything. The desert wind picked up, howling through the rocks like a warning. And somewhere in the distance, a coyote's cry split the night. Change was coming to Copper Creek, whether he was ready or not. The night had turned cold, as desert nights often do, with stars scattered across the black canvas like shattered glass. Jake sat by his small campfire, unable to shake the image of Clara Morrison from his mind. He'd made camp in a sheltered spot among the rocks, about a mile outside town, close enough to reach quickly if needed, far enough to avoid unwanted company. The fire crackled, sending sparks spiraling upward, and Jake found himself staring into the flames, remembering another woman, another time, another life that had ended in ashes. He shook his head, trying to dispel the ghosts that seemed particularly restless tonight. A sound made him look up, footsteps, hesitant and uneven, approaching through the darkness. His hand moved instinctively to his Colt, then relaxed as he recognized the silhouette. Clara emerged from the shadows, still wearing the same tattered dress. Though Ma Foster had clearly tried to clean it, she stopped at the edge of the firelight, uncertain. "Ma Foster's is warm," Jake said, not really a question. "Food's good, too. What are you doing out here?" "I couldn't stay." Her voice was steadier than before, though he could hear the exhaustion underneath. I need to explain. You helped me, and you don't even know—" "Don't need to know," Jake interrupted. "Your business is your own." "No." She moved closer to the fire, hugging herself against the cold. "You stood up to those men for me. That makes it your business now, whether you want it or not. May I—" She gestured to the ground near the fire. Jake nodded, watching as she settled herself carefully, as if every movement hurt. In the firelight, he could see bruises on her arms that the darkness had hidden before, the kind that came from gripping hands, not falls. "I couldn't pay Ma Foster," Clara said quietly. "I have nothing, no money, no possessions, no—" She paused, taking a shuddering breath. "I need to sleep in the stable, just for tonight. I can work tomorrow, earn enough to pay her back, pay you back." "Already settled with Ma Foster." Jake lied. He'd deal with that in the morning. "She's expecting you back." Clara shook her head. "I can't take charity, not anymore. I've taken too much already, and look where it's gotten me." Her laugh was bitter. I wondered if you might have work, on your ranch or wherever you're headed. I can cook, clean, mend. I'm strong, stronger than I look." "Don't have a ranch," Jake said. "Don't have much of anything except a horse and a gun. Make my living driving cattle, tracking, sometimes hunting bounties. Not the kind of life that includes domestic help." She fell silent, staring into the fire. Jake could see her throat working, fighting back words or tears or both. The wind picked up, cutting through the thin fabric of her dress, and she shivered. "Here." Jake shrugged out of his coat, holding it out to her. She looked at it like it might bite. "I can't—" "Take the damn coat before you freeze," he said gruffly. "Won't do either of us any good if you catch your death out here." She took it slowly, wrapping it around her shoulders. It swallowed her small frame, making her look even more vulnerable. They sat in silence for a while, the fire popping and hissing between them. "I had a husband," Clara said suddenly. "In Kansas. Herbert Morrison. Owned a store. Respectable man. Everyone said I was lucky." Her fingers twisted in the fabric of Jake's coat. "He died 8 months ago. Fever took him quick." Jake waited, knowing there was more. His brother came to settle the estate. Samuel said Herbert owed debts, that the store, the house, everything belonged to creditors. Said I could stay if I was grateful enough. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "I tried to find work, tried to make it on my own. But a widow with no family, no money. The choices were limited. And Samuel, He made sure everyone knew I was available, for the right price. "So you ran," Jake said. "So I ran." She looked up at him then, and the raw honesty in her eyes hit him like a physical blow. "I took what I could carry and left in the night. I've been walking for 2 weeks, hitchhiking when I could, hiding when I couldn't, and now—" She gestured helplessly at herself. "Now I'm here, with nothing, and I just realized I've been foolish enough to follow a stranger into the darkness because he showed me a moment's kindness. Could have stayed in town," Jake pointed out. "With those men watching waiting, I know their type. They'd come calling once the town was asleep." She pulled the coat tighter. "At least with you, it's just one man. Better odds." Jake felt something twist in his chest, anger at what she'd been through, mixed with an uncomfortable recognition of the brutal arithmetic of survival she'd been forced to learn. "I'm not that kind of man," he said quietly. "They all say that." "I'm sure they do." He poked at the fire with a stick, sending up a shower of sparks. "Difference is, I mean it. You want to sleep in the stable, that's your choice. But it's cold, and there are wolves in these hills. Real ones, not just the 2-legged kind. You'd be safer at Ma Foster's." "I can't—" She stopped, pressing her palms against her eyes. When she lowered them, her face was wet. "I'm sorry, I'm just so tired. Tired of running, tired of being afraid, tired of—" She made a helpless gesture. "I used to be someone, Mr. Sullivan. I had a home, a place in the world. Now I'm nothing but a burden and a target." The way she said it matter-of-fact, without self-pity, struck Jake harder than tears would have. He'd felt that same bone-deep weariness, that same sense of being stripped down to nothing but the will to keep breathing. "You're still someone," he said. "Just someone having a hard time. There's a difference." She studied him across the fire. "You sound like you know." "I know enough." He stood abruptly. Decision made. "Come on, I'll walk you back to Ma Foster's. And before you start protesting, consider this: if you freeze to death or get eaten by wolves, I'll have wasted my time standing up to Hawkins. I'm a man who doesn't like waste." That surprised a small, genuine smile from her, the first he'd seen. It transformed her face, giving a glimpse of who she might have been before life had beaten her down. "When you put it that way," she said, letting him help her to her feet. The walk back was quiet, but it was a different kind of silence than before, less desperate, more companionable. Clara still wore his coat, and Jake found he didn't mind the cold. As they reached Ma Foster's gate, Clara stopped. "I meant what I said. About paying you back. I always pay my debts." "No debt," Jake said. "Sometimes people just help each other. No ledger needed." She studied him for a long moment, then slowly shrugged out of his coat and handed it back. "Thank you, Jake Sullivan, for everything." "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow's likely to be complicated. Hawkins doesn't forget a slight, and this town's got a long memory." "I'm used to complicated," she said, but he could see the fear flicker in her eyes. He waited until she was safely inside before turning away. The walk back to his camp seemed longer, the night colder, as he rebuilt his fire and settled in for what remained of the night. Jake couldn't stop thinking about the confession in her eyes when she'd stood at the edge of his firelight, not just about her past, but about her present. The way she'd said, "I'm nothing," like she was confessing to being naked in more ways than one, stripped of everything that had once given her identity and worth. He'd seen that look before, in his own reflection. The question was whether she had the strength to build herself back up, to find something worth being again, and whether he was fool enough to stick around and find out. The fire burned low as Jake finally dozed, his hand never far from his gun. In his dreams, a woman in a tattered dress walked endless miles through the desert, and no matter how fast he rode, he could never quite catch up to offer her water. When dawn broke pale and unforgiving over the desert, Jake was already awake, watching the town come slowly to life. Somewhere down there, Clara Morrison was waking up in a warm bed, perhaps feeling safe for the first time in weeks, and somewhere else. Bill Hawkins was nursing his wounded pride and planning revenge. The day was going to be complicated indeed. The morning sun cast long shadows across Copper Creek's dusty Main Street as Jake made his way to Ma Foster's boarding house. He'd cleaned himself up as best he could at the water trough, but still felt the grit of a night spent under stars. Through the boarding house window, he glimpsed Clara helping serve breakfast, moving with purpose despite the exhaustion that still shadowed her features. Ma Foster, a stout woman with steel-gray hair and knowing eyes, met him at the door. "She's been up since before dawn," she said without preamble. "Insisted on earning her keep. Been scrubbing floors and serving food like her life depends on it." "Maybe it does," Jake replied, pressing a few coins into Ma Foster's palm. "This covers a week. She doesn't need to know." Ma Foster pocketed the money with a nod. "You're a better man than most, Jake Sullivan. But be careful. That girl's running from something fierce, and trouble has a way of following the desperate." Before Jake could respond, Clara appeared in the doorway, wisps of hair escaping from a borrowed bonnet, her hands red from lye soap. When she saw him, something flickered across her face, relief, wariness, and something else he couldn't name. "Mr. Sullivan," she said formally. "I was hoping to speak with you." They walked to the small garden behind the boarding house, where Ma Foster grew vegetables in defiance of the desert climate. Clara sat on a weathered bench, her back straight despite everything. "I need to tell you the truth," she began. "All of it. You've shown me kindness, and I won't repay that with lies. Told you last night, your business is—" "Please," she held up a hand. "Let me finish, or I'll lose my nerve." Jake settled against a fence post, waiting. "My husband died of fever. That much was true. But the rest—" She took a deep breath. "Herbert was a good man, but weak. He let his brother Samuel run parts of the business, trusted him with the books. After Herbert died, I discovered Samuel had been stealing, cooking the ledgers. The debts were real, but they were Samuel's debts, not Herbert's." "You could have gone to the law," Jake said. Clara's laugh was bitter. "Samuel's poker friends included the sheriff and the judge. When I tried to speak out, to show them the real books I'd found hidden in Herbert's desk, Samuel told everyone I'd gone mad with grief. Said I was unstable, hysterical, a danger to myself." Jake's jaw tightened. He'd seen how easily a woman's word could be dismissed, how quickly she could be labeled difficult or crazy for speaking uncomfortable truths. "They were going to send me to an asylum," Clara continued, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "For my own good. Samuel said, but I heard him talking to the doctor, negotiating the price for keeping me there indefinitely. So I ran." "With the books?" She shook her head. "Burned them. What good would they do me? No one would believe me anyway. I took what money I could find and left everything else behind. My mother's jewelry, my wedding dress, photographs. A whole life reduced to what I could carry in a carpet bag. And then, 3 days out of Kansas, someone stole even that while I slept by the road." The morning sun was climbing higher, and Jake could see the toll the telling took on her, but she pressed on, as if the words had been dammed up too long. "I've been walking ever since 2 weeks of—" She gestured helplessly. "Of becoming less and less human with each mile. Sleeping in barns when I was lucky, under bushes when I wasn't, eating what I could beg or find. And the men," her voice dropped. "Always the men, looking at me like I was something to be used and discarded. Each town was the same. A woman alone, no money, no connections, might as well wear a sign saying pray." "But you kept going," Jake observed. "What else could I do? Stop, give up, let them win?" Fire flashed in her eyes. "I may have nothing left, Mr. Sullivan, but I'm still breathing. That has to count for something." Jake studied her. This small woman who'd walked through hell and somehow kept her spirit intact. He'd known soldiers who'd broken under less pressure, strong men who'd given up when faced with smaller losses. "My turn," he said quietly, "since we're trading truths." Clara looked up, surprised. "Name's Jake Sullivan. Like I said, 42 years old, fought in the war union side, though that matters less out here. Came home to find my wife dead of the pox and my daughter." He paused, the old pain still sharp after all these years. "Sarah was 8. Neighbor said she waited for me every day. Sure I'd come home. Died calling my name." Clara's hand moved as if to reach for him, then stopped. "After that, I drifted, signed on with cattle drives, rode with the Rangers for a while, hunted bounties when money got tight, did things I'm not proud of, hurt people who probably didn't deserve it, built up a reputation as a man you didn't cross, mainly because I didn't care anymore if I lived or died." "What changed?" Clara asked softly. "Nothing dramatic. Just woke up one day tired of being empty. Decided if I had to keep living, might as well try to do it with some semblance of honor. It's been a work in progress." They sat in silence for a moment, two damaged souls recognizing something of themselves in the other. "So what now?" Clara asked eventually. "I can't stay here forever. Samuel will come looking, or send someone, and your friend Hawkins—" "Hawkins is no friend of mine." Jake cut in. "But you're right. This town's too small for you to disappear in. You need to move on, get somewhere bigger where you can start fresh." "With what money, what prospects?" She stood abruptly, pacing the small garden. "I've thought it through 100 times. Without references, without connections. What work can I find that doesn't require me to sacrifice what little dignity I have left?" Jake watched her pace, an idea forming. It was foolish, probably dangerous, definitely complicated. But then again, his life had been all three for years now. "There's a ranch about 3 days' ride north," he said slowly. "Widow named Margaret Shaw runs it with her 2 sons. Good people, Christian folk. They're always looking for help, especially someone who can cook and keep house. I've done work for them before they trust my word." Clara stopped pacing. "You'd vouch for me. You barely know me." "I know enough." Jake said, "Know you're a fighter. Know you're honest, even when a lie would be easier. Know you're willing to work hard. That's more than I can say for most people I meet." 3 days' ride. Clara repeated, "I don't have a horse. I don't even have proper shoes anymore." "I've got a horse, and there's a general store that'll extend me credit." He held up a hand as she started to protest. "Call it an investment. Margaret Shaw pays fair wages. You can pay me back once you're settled." Clara sank back onto the bench, looking overwhelmed. "Why are you doing this, really?" Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then, maybe because someone should have done it for my wife and daughter when I wasn't there, maybe because I'm tired of seeing the strong prey on the weak, or maybe just because I can. He shrugged. "Does it matter?" "Yes," she said simply. "It matters to me." Before Jake could respond, a commotion from the street caught their attention. Raised voices, the sound of horses, and then Ma Foster appeared in the garden gate, her face tight with worry. "Trouble," she said simply. "3 riders just came into town. They're asking questions about a woman, showing a photograph around. One of them's wearing a badge." Clara went pale, her hand clutching the bench. "Samuel?" she whispered. "He actually sent lawmen after me." "Probably bounty hunters with homemade badges," Jake said grimly. "Real law doesn't usually ride this far for a runaway widow." He turned to Ma Foster. "Where are they now?" "Saloon, last I saw, but they'll make their way here soon enough. This is the only boarding house in town." Jake made a quick decision. "Clara, get your things. Whatever you can carry. Ma Foster, tell anyone who asks that she left before dawn, heading south toward Mexico. Bought her a mule and wished her luck." "But," Clara started. "No time for arguments. We leave in 10 minutes." He strode toward the gate, then paused. Unless you'd rather stay and explain your side to Samuel's hired guns. Clara's chin came up, that spark of defiance he'd seen before flashing in her eyes. 10 minutes, she agreed, and disappeared into the house. As Jake headed for the stables to ready his horse, he caught sight of the 3 riders outside the saloon, hard men with harder eyes, the kind who'd track a woman through hell for the right price. One of them was showing something to a gathered crowd, likely Clara's photograph. This was about to get complicated indeed. But as Jake saddled his horse and prepared for whatever came next, he found himself almost welcoming it. For the first time in years, he had something worth fighting for, even if that something was just the chance to see Clara Morrison make it to safety. The past had finally caught up, just as he'd known it would. The question now was whether they could outrun it long enough to find a future. The sun had reached its zenith when trouble finally found them. Jake had managed to get Clara out of town through the back alleys, but he'd known their departure wouldn't go unnoticed. They'd made it perhaps 5 miles into the desert when the sound of hoofbeats echoed across the barren landscape. "Riders," Clara said, her voice tight with fear. She sat behind Jake on his horse, her arms wrapped around his waist, tension radiating through every muscle. Jake had already spotted them, 6 men riding hard from the direction of Copper Creek. 3 would be Samuel's bounty hunters, and he'd bet his last dollar the other 3 were Hawkins and his boys, eager to settle scores. "Hold on," he said, spurring his horse toward a cluster of rocks ahead. They needed cover, and they needed it fast. They'd barely reached the relative shelter of the boulders when the first shot rang out, sending chips of rock flying past Clara's head. She gasped, but didn't scream, pressing closer against Jake's back as he swung down from the saddle, pulling her with him. "Stay low," he ordered, drawing his Winchester from its scabbard. "No matter what happens, you stay behind these rocks." "Jake!" No arguments. He checked his ammunition, mind already calculating angles and odds. 6 against 1 wasn't good, but he'd faced worse. "These men want you alive. Me, they'll kill without thinking twice. So you stay hidden. Understand?" Clara nodded, her face pale but determined. She picked up a rock, hefting it like a weapon. "I'm not helpless." "Despite everything," Jake almost smiled. "Never said you were." Sullivan, Hawkins' voice carried across the desert. "You've got something that doesn't belong to you. Send the woman out, and maybe we let you ride away." "Funny thing about belonging," Jake called back, sighting down his rifle. "Last I checked, people weren't property." "She's a fugitive," another voice said deeper, more cultured. "One of the bounty hunters," Jake figured. "Clara Morrison, you're wanted for theft and destruction of property in Kansas. Come quietly, and no one needs to get hurt." "That's a lie." Clara started to rise, but Jake pushed her back down. "Truth doesn't matter much to dead people," he muttered. Then, louder, "You boys want to come any closer, you'd better be prepared for the consequences. I've got plenty of ammunition and all day to use it." The response was another shot, this one closer. Jake returned fire, his shot sending one of the riders diving from his saddle. Not hit, but scared. Good enough for now. What followed was a deadly game of patience. The attackers spread out, trying to flank their position, while Jake picked his shots carefully, making every bullet count. The sun beat down mercilessly, and Jake could feel sweat soaking through his shirt. "There!" Clara hissed, pointing to movement among the scrub brush to their left. Jake swung his rifle around just as a figure rose, pistol aimed. His shot took the man in the shoulder, spinning him around and dropping him to the dirt. "That's one down," Jake said grimly. 5 to go. But their position was becoming untenable. The attackers were working their way closer, using every bit of cover the desert provided. It was only a matter of time before they were surrounded completely. "Sullivan," this time it was definitely Hawkins. "Last chance, the woman for your life. Hell, we'll even cut you in on the bounty. $500. They're offering. That's good money for a saddle tramp like you. If I wanted blood money, I'd have stayed a bounty hunter myself, Jake replied, squeezing off another shot that sent Hawkins scrambling for better cover. Clara touched his arm. $500. Samuel's offering $500 just to get me back. Man must want you pretty bad, Jake said, not taking his eyes off the approaching threats. Or want you silenced pretty bad. I won't go back, she said fiercely. I'll die first. Nobody's dying today except maybe some fools who should have stayed in town. But even as he said it, Jake knew their situation was deteriorating. His ammunition was running low, and the circle was tightening. Then things went from bad to worse. Jake heard the distinctive click of a hammer being cocked behind them. He spun, but too late. One of the bounty hunters had circled wide, approaching from the one direction Jake couldn't cover. Drop the rifle, the man said. He was tall, lean, with the cold eyes of someone who killed for profit without losing sleep. Slow and easy, Jake had no choice. He set the Winchester down carefully, his mind racing for options. Stand up, both of you. Hands where I can see them. They rose slowly. Clara pressed close to Jake's side. The other attackers emerged from cover, converging on their position. Hawkins wore a satisfied smirk, blood seeping from a graze on his cheek where one of Jake's bullets had come close. Well, well, Hawkins said. The great Jake Sullivan, brought low by a woman. How the mighty fall. This isn't about me and you, Hawkins, Jake said evenly. Let it go. Oh, but it is about us. Hawkins stepped closer, his hand hovering near his gun. You disrespected me in front of the whole town. Can't let that slide. The lead bounty hunter, the one with the cold eyes, interrupted. We're here for the woman. What you do with Sullivan is your business, but do it quick. We've got a long ride back to Kansas. No, Clara stepped forward, placing herself between Jake and the guns. I'll come quietly, but only if you let him go. He was just helping me. He doesn't deserve to die for that. Clara, don't, Jake started, but she turned to face him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. You gave me hope when I had none, she said softly. Let me give you life in return. Touching, Hawkins sneered. But nobody's making deals here. He drew his pistol in one smooth motion, aiming at Jake. I've waited a long time for this. The gunshot was deafening in the desert silence, but it wasn't Hawkins's gun that fired. The bounty hunter behind them crumpled, a red stain spreading across his chest. From the rocks above, a new voice called out, Next man who moves toward that lady gets the same. Jake recognized the voice. Tom Garrett, an old ranger buddy who ran a small spread about 10 miles north. 2 more riders appeared on the ridge, rifles trained on the group below. Tom, Jake called out, relief flooding through him. Your timing's impeccable as always. Saw the dust from your little party, Tom replied. Figured you might need some evening of the odds. He chambered another round audibly. Now, way I see it, you boys got 2 choices. Ride away now, or stay permanent like. What's it gonna be? The remaining bounty hunters exchanged glances, without their leader. Facing superior positioning and firepower, the smart money was on retreat. This isn't over, one of them said, backing toward his horse. The warrant's still good. She'll be running forever. Maybe, Jake said, but not today. Hawkins looked like he wanted to argue, but even he wasn't stupid enough to face 3 riflemen in good cover. You've made an enemy today, Sullivan, he snarled. You and your whore both. Jake's fist connected with Hawkins's jaw before anyone could react, sending the man sprawling in the dust. Watch your mouth, he said quietly, or next time it won't be my fist doing the talking. Hawkins struggled to his feet, spitting blood, but his companions were already mounting up. With one last venomous look, he followed suit. The group rode off, leaving dust and 1 dead bounty hunter behind. Tom and his men climbed down from the rocks, and Jake clasped his friend's hand gratefully. I owe you one, You owe me more than one. Tom grinned, then sobered. But this is just a reprieve. Jake, they'll be back, with more men probably, and that dead fellow's going to complicate things. Self-defense, Jake said. You all saw it. We saw it, Tom agreed. But a bounty hunter's still law-adjacent. There'll be questions. Clara had been silent through the exchange, but now she swayed on her feet, the delayed shock of violence. Jake realized, as he caught her before she could fall. She was trembling, her eyes fixed on the dead man. I've never seen someone killed before, she whispered. He was going to murder you, and now he's dead. And it's because of me. It's because he made a choice, Jake said firmly. Same as we all did. You're not responsible for other people's evil. Tom cleared his throat. Not to interrupt, but we should move. That body's going to attract scavengers, 4-legged and 2-legged both. You can hole up at my place tonight, figure out your next move. As they prepared to leave, Clara looked back at the scene of violence, then up at Jake. They'll keep coming, won't they? Samuel won't stop. Probably not, Jake admitted. But that's tomorrow's problem. Today, we're alive and free. Sometimes that's enough. They rode toward Tom's ranch as the sun began its descent, painting the desert in shades of gold and red. Behind them, buzzards were already circling. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and the promise of more violence to come. But for now, Clara was safe, pressed against Jake's back as they rode, her arms around his waist, no longer desperate but trusting. He'd nearly lost his mind when she'd stepped in front of those guns, ready to sacrifice herself for him. The fierce protectiveness he'd felt in that moment had surprised him. He hadn't thought himself capable of caring that much about anyone anymore. The day had written its story in blood and dust, but they'd survived it. Together, and maybe, just maybe, that meant something more than either of them was ready to admit. The landscape changed as they rode north, leaving behind the familiar desert scrub for a terrain of red rock formations and scattered juniper trees. They'd been traveling for 2 days since leaving Tom Garrett's ranch, pushing hard to put distance between themselves and any pursuit. The mountains loomed ahead, their peaks still carrying the last traces of winter snow despite the growing warmth of spring. Clara had proven herself a stronger rider than Jake expected, though he could see the toll the constant travel was taking on her. She no longer clung to him desperately as she had that first day, but sat with a growing confidence that spoke of her determination to adapt, to survive. There, Jake pointed to a narrow canyon cutting through the red rocks. We'll make camp early today. The horses need rest, and so do we. They found a sheltered spot near a small spring, a rare blessing in this harsh country. Jake tended to the horses while Clara gathered wood for a fire, moving with the efficiency of someone who'd learned quickly that survival required everyone to pull their weight. As the sun began its descent, painting the canyon walls in brilliant shades of orange and purple, they sat by their small fire sharing the last of their dried beef and hard biscuits. Tomorrow they'd need to hunt or find a settlement to resupply. It's beautiful, Clara said softly, gazing at the play of light on stone. I never imagined anything could be beautiful out here. Back in Kansas, they always said the West was nothing but death and desolation. It's both, Jake replied, following her gaze. Beautiful and deadly. Kind of like life itself, I suppose. Clara was quiet for a moment. Then, do you ever regret it helping me? Ask me that when we reach California. Jake said, though if we're being honest, I haven't felt this alive in years. Having something to fight for, I'd forgotten what that was like. She turned to study him, firelight dancing in her eyes. Is that what I am something to fight for? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither seemed ready to address. Jake poked at the fire, sending sparks spiraling upward. You're someone who deserves a chance, he said finally. Same as anyone else. That's not what I asked. Before Jake could respond, a sound made them both freeze, the distinctive rattle of displaced stones from the canyon rim above. Jake's hand went to his gun, but then a familiar voice called out, "Hello, the camp, don't shoot, it's Tom Garrett." Jake relaxed as Tom rode into view, but his relief turned to concern when he saw his friend's grim expression. "Trouble?" Jake asked without preamble. "Afraid so." Tom dismounted, accepting the cup of coffee Clara quickly poured. "Word spread about that dead bounty hunter. There's a federal marshal in Copper Creek asking questions. And those Kansas boys wired for reinforcements. There's talk of a $1,000 reward now." Clara's face paled. $1,000? That's a fortune." "Enough to turn honest men dishonest." Tom agreed. "Jake, you need to know they're not just calling her a thief now. They're saying she murdered her husband." "What?" Clara shot to her feet, coffee spilling. "Herbert died of fever. I nursed him for days, begged the doctor to do more." "Easy," Jake said, catching her arm as she swayed. "We know it's a lie, but lies with money behind them have a way of becoming truth in people's minds." Tom nodded grimly. "There's more. Hawkins is gathering men, talking about forming a posse. Says it's about justice, but everyone knows it's about you. Jake, he wants your blood, and he's using her as an excuse to get it." Jake felt Clara trembling under his hand. "How many men?" 8, maybe 10. Good guns, too. Some of them are veterans like us." Tom hesitated. "Jake, I came to warn you, but I also came to suggest something you're not going to like." "Spit it out." Tom looked between them, clearly uncomfortable. "Turn her in. Not to the Kansas boys, to the federal marshal. Make sure she gets a fair trial. Proper representation. It's the only way to clear her name legal-like." "No." Clara's voice was flat, final. "I won't get a fair trial. Not with Samuel's money buying the verdict. I'd rather die free than hang for a crime I didn't commit." "Clara," Tom started, but Jake cut him off. "She's right. You know as well as I do that justice and law aren't always the same thing, especially not for a woman with no money and powerful enemies." Tom sighed, suddenly looking older. "Then you need to run far and fast. Mexico, maybe, or California. Somewhere you can disappear." "We're heading to California," Jake confirmed. "Another week of hard riding should see us clear." "If you make it that long." Tom stood, setting down his cup. "I've done what I can. Jake, bought you maybe a day's head start by sending some folks on a wild goose chase south, but that's all I can do without putting my own family at risk." "You've done more than enough," Jake said, clasping his friend's hand. "I won't forget it." After Tom left, they sat in silence watching the fire die down. The canyon had grown cold, and Clara moved closer to Jake, seeking warmth. "I'm destroying your life," she said quietly. "Your reputation, your friendships, everything. And for what? So I can keep running until they finally catch me." "You're not destroying anything," Jake said firmly. "My life wasn't much to speak of before you came along. Drifting from job to job, fighting other people's battles for money, waiting to catch a bullet that would end the emptiness. That's not living. Clara, that's just going through the motions." She looked up at him, something shifting in her expression. "And now I have a purpose. Someone worth protecting. Someone who reminds me there's still good in this world worth fighting for." The moon had risen, casting silver light into the canyon. In that soft illumination, Clara reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the scar on his cheek. "You're a good man, Jake Sullivan, better than you know." He caught her hand, holding it against his face. "Clara." "I know," she whispered. "Wrong time, wrong place, wrong everything. But I needed to say it, in case we don't get another chance." Jake pulled her closer, wrapping his blanket around both of them. "We'll get our chance. I promise you that." They sat together watching the stars wheel overhead. two souls finding comfort in each other's presence despite the danger closing in around them. Neither spoke of the growing feelings between them. There would be time for that later, when they were safe, if they ever were. As Clara finally dozed against his shoulder, Jake kept watch, his rifle across his knees. The night sounds of the canyon, the call of an owl, the rustle of small creatures were familiar, almost comforting. But underneath the peace, he could feel the tension building, like the air before a storm. $1,000. Enough money to bring every bounty hunter and desperate man within 500 miles? Tom was right, they needed to move fast and far. But as he looked down at Clara's sleeping face, peaceful for the first time since he'd met her, Jake made a silent vow. Whatever came next, whatever army Hawkins gathered or lies Samuel spread, Jake would see her safe. He'd failed to protect the people he loved once before. He wouldn't fail again. The canyon grew colder as the night deepened, and Jake pulled Clara closer, sharing what warmth they had. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, the need for supplies, the constant threat of pursuit, the harsh reality of the trail ahead. But tonight, in this moment, they had each other. And sometimes, in a world full of cruelty and loss, that was miracle enough. Dawn would come soon enough, and with it the need to run again. But for now, Jake held Clara close and kept his vigil. Guardian of her sleep and keeper of hopes, neither dared speak aloud. The stars faded one by one as the eastern sky began to lighten, and still Jake watched, ready for whatever the new day might bring. He'd been a soldier, a hunter, a man with nothing left to lose. Now he was something else, something more. He was a man with something precious to protect, and that, he was learning, made all the difference in the world. The town of Silver Ridge sprawled before them like a promise of civilization after days of hard travel through unforgiving terrain. Larger than Copper Creek, it boasted proper streets, a courthouse, and enough people that two strangers might hope to pass unnoticed. Jake and Clara rode in as the afternoon sun cast long shadows, both acutely aware of the risk they were taking by entering any settlement. "We need supplies," Jake said quietly, scanning the busy main street. "Food, ammunition, maybe a second horse if we can manage it. In and out quick." Clara nodded, adjusting the bonnet they'd bought from a traveling family 2 days prior. It helped hide her face, though Jake noticed how men's eyes still followed her, even trail-worn and exhausted. She carried herself with a dignity that drew attention. They hitched their horse outside the general store, and Jake pressed a few coins into Clara's hand. "Get what food you can. I'll handle the ammunition. Meet back here in 15 minutes. "Be careful," she said, her fingers lingering against his for just a moment. Inside the store, Clara moved efficiently through the aisles, selecting hardtack, dried beans, and preserved meat. The prices were higher than she'd expected frontier markup, she supposed, but they had no choice. As she reached for a tin of peaches, a luxury they couldn't really afford but might lift their spirits, a voice behind her made her blood run cold. Clara Morrison." She turned slowly, her heart hammering. A woman stood there, elegantly dressed despite the frontier setting Martha Colton, who'd been part of her social circle back in Kansas. You must be mistaken," Clara said, trying to keep her voice steady. Martha's eyes narrowed. "No, it's you. I'd recognize you anywhere, despite—" She gestured at Clara's simple clothes. "My heavens, what are you doing here? Everyone back home thinks you're dead." "Please," Clara whispered urgently. "You can't have seen me. Please, Martha." Understanding dawned in the other woman's eyes, followed quickly by something else, calculation. "Oh my, you're running from Samuel, aren't you? I heard about the accusations. Of course, such a scandal." "Martha, don't worry, dear. Your secret's safe with me." Martha's smile was sharp as cut glass. "Though I must say, traveling with that rough-looking man outside, people might get the wrong idea. Or perhaps the right one." Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. He's helping me, nothing more. Of course. Martha's tone suggested she believed otherwise. Well, I should go. My husband's waiting. But Clara, a word of advice: you might want to leave town quickly. I may be discreet, but others from our set travel through here regularly. The territorial governor's wife, for instance, is due next week for the Springs. With that warning, Martha swept out, leaving Clara shaken. She quickly paid for her purchases and hurried outside, nearly colliding with Jake as he emerged from the gunsmith's. We need to go, they said simultaneously. Jake's eyes sharpened. What happened? Someone recognized me, a woman from Kansas. Clara glanced nervously around. She said she'd keep quiet, but you don't trust her. Smart. Jake was already untying their horse. Change of plans. We'll camp outside town tonight. Leave before dawn. They were mounting up when a voice called out, You there, hold up! A man wearing a deputy's star was striding toward them, hand resting on his pistol. Jake tensed but kept his movements casual. Something wrong. Deputy. The lawman studied them with sharp eyes. New in town. Just passing through. Jake replied evenly. Heading to California to meet up with family. Uh-huh. The deputy's gaze lingered on Clara. Funny thing. We got a wire this morning about a woman fitting your companion's description. Wanted for questioning in Kansas. Clara's hands tightened on Jake's waist, but she kept her face calm. Lots of women heading west these days. Jake said, Hard times back east. True enough. The deputy stepped closer. Mind if I ask your name, Miss? Sarah Sullivan, Clara said, surprising Jake with the steadiness of her voice. This is my husband, Jake. The deputy looked between them, clearly skeptical. The moment stretched taut as a bowstring. Then fate intervened in the form of a commotion down the street, a fight breaking out between drunk cowboys. Requiring immediate attention, the deputy swore under his breath. Don't leave town, he ordered, then hurried toward the disturbance. Jake didn't need to be told twice. He spurred their horse into motion, heading not for the open trail where they'd be easily followed, but toward the maze of back alleys and side streets. That was quick thinking, he said as they navigated between buildings. Sarah Sullivan. I panicked, Clara admitted. It was the first name that came to mind. Your daughter. Jake was quiet for a moment. She would have liked you, he said finally. Same spirit. They cleared the town's edge as dusk fell. But Jake didn't stop. He pushed into the hills, following deer trails and creek beds, anything to obscure their path. Only when full darkness made further travel dangerous did he finally halt in a grove of cottonwoods. No fire tonight, he said, helping Clara down. Too risky. They made a cold camp, sharing what warmth they could. Clara was unusually quiet, and Jake could feel the tension radiating from her. What is it? He asked finally. That woman, Martha, the way she looked at me. Clara's voice was bitter. Like I was something scandalous, fallen, and maybe she's right. Traveling with a man who isn't my husband, running from the law. Running from lies. Jake corrected firmly. There's a difference. Is there in the eyes of society? Clara laughed humorlessly. I was raised to be respectable. Jake, to marry well, keep house, raise children, to be a lady. Now look at me. I don't even recognize myself anymore. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then, maybe that's not a bad thing. She turned to him in the darkness. What do you mean? The woman I met in that saloon was beaten down but not broken. She'd walked hundreds of miles on pure determination. She stood up to men who would have crushed her spirit. He found her hand in the darkness, squeezing gently. That's not some society lady. That's someone forged by fire into something stronger. I don't feel strong, Clara whispered. I feel scared all the time. Being scared doesn't mean you're not strong. Means you're smart enough to recognize danger. Jake shifted closer. You know what I see when I look at you, a survivor. Someone who refuses to let the world break her, no matter how hard it tries. And when the world finally succeeds, Clara asked. When they catch us, because they will. Jake, we both know it. There are too many of them. Too much money at stake. Then we face it together. Jake said simply, whatever comes. In the darkness, Clara turned toward him fully. I heard what you called me back there. When you were talking to the deputy, you said it first. No, her voice was soft. After, you called me your wife, not the woman or my companion. Your wife. Jake was grateful for the darkness hiding his expression. It seemed simpler. Is that all it was, simpler? The question hung between them like a challenge. Jake could feel her warmth beside him, could hear her breathing in the quiet night. Everything practical screamed at him to deflect, to maintain the boundaries that kept things uncomplicated. Instead, he told the truth. No, that's not all it was. Clara's hand found his face in the darkness, fingertips tracing familiar paths. Jake Sullivan, what are we doing? Surviving, he said. Living, finding something worth holding on to in a world that keeps trying to tear everything away. Is that enough? For now, Jake said, catching her hand and pressing it to his lips. For tonight, it's enough. They held each other in the darkness, two fugitives finding shelter not from the law, but from loneliness. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The deputy would raise the alarm. Martha Colton might or might not keep her silence, and the net would draw tighter. But tonight, in this grove of cottonwoods with stars glimpsing through the leaves, they had carved out a moment of peace. Clara curled against Jake's chest, finally allowing exhaustion to claim her, while he kept watch as always. The respectable woman from Kansas was indeed gone, replaced by someone harder, more resilient, but also someone capable of deeper feeling, of choosing love over safety, freedom over respectability. As Jake held her sleeping form, he realized the transformation went both ways. The empty drifter who'd walked into Copper Creek was gone too, replaced by a man with purpose, with someone to protect, with a reason to believe in tomorrow. The night wore on, filled with the small sounds of nocturnal life and the steady rhythm of Clara's breathing. And Jake Sullivan, gunfighter and loner, found himself praying to a God he'd long ago stopped believing in, not for salvation or forgiveness, but simply for time. Time to see Clara safe, time to prove her innocence, time to explore what was growing between them. Just a little more time. The first snow came early that year, catching them in the high country as they pushed through a mountain pass. Fat white flakes swirled around them, transforming the landscape into something alien and treacherous. Jake had hoped to be through the mountains before winter truly set in, but their constant need to avoid towns and main trails had cost them precious time. There, Jake pointed through the swirling snow to a dark smudge against the mountainside. Looks like an old trapper's cabin. They fought their way through deepening drifts, the horses struggling with each step. Clara huddled against Jake's back, her body shaking with cold despite the heavy coat they'd managed to acquire in the last settlement. By the time they reached the cabin, both were near frozen. The structure was abandoned, but solid, built by someone who understood mountain winters. Jake forced the door open, revealing a single room with a stone fireplace, rough-hewn furniture, and blessed shelter from the storm. Get inside, he told Clara, whose lips had turned an alarming shade of blue. I'll see to the horses. There was a small lean-to attached to the cabin where he settled their mounts with what little feed they had left. When he returned, Clara had managed to start a fire with shaking hands, using wood from a stack by the hearth. Our lucky day, she said through chattering teeth. Shelter when we needed it most. Jake pulled her close to the fire, rubbing her arms to restore circulation. We'll wait out the storm here. No one will be tracking us through this. As warmth slowly returned to the cabin, they took stock of their situation. Supplies were dangerously low, maybe 3 days of food if they stretched it. Ammunition was down to a dozen rounds, and now they were trapped by weather that might last days or even weeks. "I can hunt," Jake said, thinking aloud. "Saw a deer sign on the way up, and there might be supplies cached here somewhere. Trappers usually."
"Jake,"
Clara's quiet voice stopped him.
"look at us. Really look."
He did, seeing what he'd been trying to ignore. Their clothes were threadbare, patched and repatched. Clara had lost weight she couldn't afford to lose, her face gaunt despite its lingering beauty. His own reflection in the window showed a man running on pure will, exhaustion etched in every line. "We can't keep going like this," Clara continued.
"Running forever, jumping at shadows, slowly starving or freezing to death."
She moved to the window, watching the snow fall. "Maybe it's time to stop."
"Clara, I'm tired. Jake."
Her voice was soft, defeated in a way he'd never heard before.
"So tired of being afraid,
Of making you live as a fugitive because of my troubles. You could have had a different life if you'd never met me." Jake crossed to her in 2 strides, turning her to face him.
Don't you dare give up on me now."
"I'm not giving up. I'm being practical." She touched his face, fingers tracing lines that hadn't been there months ago. "You've aged years and weeks because of me. How is that fair?" "Fair," Jake laughed, short and sharp. "When has life ever been fair? You think I care about fair?" He cupped her face between his hands. "I care about you, about us, about the future we're fighting toward." "What future?" Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Even if we make it to California, then what? Live under false names, forever always looking over our shoulders, never able to settle anywhere long enough to build a real life." Jake was quiet for a moment, then led her to the rough bench by the fire. "Let me tell you something about futures," he said. "After my family died, I thought I had no future, just endless days of existing, waiting for the bullet that would end it all. Then you walked into that saloon, and everything changed. I brought you nothing but trouble. You brought me back to life." Jake interrupted firmly. "For the first time in years, I have something to fight for, someone to protect, someone who—" He paused, struggling with words that didn't come easily. "Someone who makes me want to see tomorrow." Clara studied his face in the firelight. "Is that enough, wanting to see tomorrow?" "It's everything," Jake said simply. "The rest names, places, settled life, that's just details. What matters is facing whatever comes together." The storm howled outside, rattling the cabin's shutters. Inside, the fire crackled warmly, creating a bubble of safety in a hostile world. Clara leaned into Jake, and he wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Not of dying, of losing you, of watching you die because of me." "Then we'll just have to both stay alive," Jake said, out of pure stubbornness, if nothing else. That surprised a small laugh from her. "You make it sound so simple." "Simple? No. Possible? Yes." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "We've made it this far, through deserts and ambushes, bounty hunters and lawmen. A little snow won't stop us now." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire and listening to the storm. Then Clara stirred, a different energy in her movements. "If we're going to be trapped here for days," she said, "we should look for those supplies you mentioned." They searched the cabin systematically, finding treasures in unexpected places. A trunk under the bed yielded blankets, moth-eaten but warm. Loose floorboards concealed tins of beans and preserved meat, along with a bottle of whiskey. Behind a pile of firewood, they discovered snowshoes and heavy furs. "Trapper must have died on the trail," Jake said, examining the supplies. "Never made it back for his cash." "Poor soul," Clara murmured. "But his misfortune is our salvation." As night deepened, they prepared a meal that felt like a feast after weeks of short rations. The beans were old but edible, the meat tough but filling. They even allowed themselves a small measure of whiskey, feeling it burn warm paths to their stomachs. To unexpected shelters, Clara toasted, raising the tin cup. To stubborn survivors, Jake countered. Later, wrapped in musty blankets before the fire, Clara traced patterns on Jake's chest through his shirt. Tell me about California, she said. What will we do when we get there? Jake considered. Find a town that needs a sheriff. Maybe. Or sign on with a ranch. Save enough to buy a little spread of our own eventually. Nothing fancy, just a house, some cattle, maybe chickens for you to fuss over. Chickens, Clara smiled. Is that how you see me fussing over chickens? Among other things, garden too, if you want, and maybe... He hesitated. Maybe what? Maybe children, someday, if you wanted. Clara was quiet so long Jake wondered if he'd overstepped. Then she spoke, voice thick with emotion. I thought that dream died with Herbert, the chance for a normal life, a family. Nothing about our life will ever be normal, Jake admitted. But that doesn't mean it can't be good, can't be ours. She lifted herself on one elbow to look at him. Jake Sullivan, are you proposing to me in a trapper's cabin in the middle of a blizzard while we're running from the law? Would that be so strange? He asked. Given everything else? No, she said softly. It would be perfect, just like you. I'm far from perfect, Clara. Perfect for me, then. She kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. Yes, 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 I'll marry you. When we get to California, when we're safe, when we can use our real names and not look over our shoulders. She settled back against his chest, something to fight toward. Something to fight toward, Jake agreed, holding her close. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the cabin, two souls had found warmth that went beyond the fire's heat. They talked late into the night, making plans they might never see fulfilled, but that gave shape to hope. A small ranch, a vegetable garden, children who would never know the running and fear their parents had endured. When Clara finally drifted off to sleep, Jake stayed awake, watching the fire and thinking. The storm was both blessing and curse. It stopped their pursuers but also trapped them. When it cleared, they'd have to move fast, make up for lost time. But for now, for tonight, they had this, a warm cabin, food in their bellies, and dreams of a future together. Jake pressed his lips to Clara's hair and closed his eyes, allowing himself a moment of pure contentment. Tomorrow would bring its challenges. The storm would end, the hunt would resume, and they'd have to run again. But they'd run together, toward something now instead of just away, toward California and a new life, toward the promise of their own name spoken before a preacher, toward home. The wind howled and the snow fell, but inside the mountain cabin, Jake Sullivan held his future wife and dared to believe that sometimes, against all odds, love could indeed conquer all. The storm had cleared 3 days ago, leaving the world crystalline and dangerous. Jake and Clara had made good time through the passes, but as they descended toward the valley that would lead them to California, Jake's instincts screamed danger. The hair on the back of his neck hadn't stopped prickling since dawn. Jake! Clara sensed his tension, her own body stiffening behind him on the horse. We're being followed, he said quietly. Have been since yesterday. They'd just entered a narrow canyon when his worst fears materialized. Riders appeared on the ridges above 10, 12, maybe more. At the canyon's mouth ahead, Bill Hawkins sat his horse with a satisfied smile, flanked by hard-faced men. End of the trail, Sullivan, Hawkins called out. You've led us a merry chase, but it's over. Jake's mind raced, calculating odds that weren't just bad, they were impossible. The canyon walls rose sheer on either side, no cover except scattered boulders. Clara's arms tightened around his waist. Let her go, Hawkins, Jake called back. This is between you and me. Not anymore. A new voice, cultured and cold. Samuel Morrison emerged from behind Hawkins, dressed in a city suit that looked absurd in the wilderness. "Hello, sister-in-law. You've caused me considerable trouble and expense." "Samuel." Clara's voice was steady despite everything. "Still hiding behind hired guns? I see. Business, my dear. Nothing personal." Samuel's smile was reptilian. "Though I must admit, I'll sleep better knowing you won't be spreading lies about me anymore." "The truth, you mean?" Clara shot back. Jake had been scanning desperately for options when he spotted it, a narrow cleft in the canyon wall, partially hidden by a fallen boulder. It might lead nowhere, but nowhere was better than here. "Hold tight," he murmured to Clara, then spurred his horse directly at Hawkins. The sudden charge caught them off guard. Gunfire erupted, bullets whining off rocks as Jake rode straight into their midst. Men dove aside, and in the chaos, he veered hard left toward the cleft. They almost made it. The bullet took Jake high in the shoulder, spinning him half out of the saddle. Only Clara's desperate grip kept him mounted as they plunged into the narrow passage. Behind them, shouts and more gunfire, but the cleft was too narrow for pursuit on horseback. "Jake!" Clara slid down, supporting him as he dismounted. Blood was already soaking his shirt. "Keep moving," he gritted out. "They'll be coming on foot." The passage twisted and climbed, barely wide enough for a single person. Jake stumbled along, Clara half carrying him, until it opened onto a small ledge with a spectacular view of the valley below, and no other exit. "Trapped," Clara whispered. Jake slumped against the rock wall, checking his gun. 4 bullets left. He pressed the weapon into Clara's hands. "When they come, you use this. Save the last bullet for—" "No." Her voice was fierce. "We fight together or not at all." Voices echoed up the passage. Jake forced himself upright, taking the gun back. "Get behind me." "I'm through hiding behind you. Jake Sullivan." Clara picked up a heavy rock. "If this is the end, we face it side by side." The first pursuer rounded the corner and Jake fired, dropping him. Then they came in a rush. Jake fought with desperate precision, making every shot count. Clara swung her rock with savage determination, catching one man in the temple, but there were too many. A rifle butt caught Jake in his wounded shoulder, driving him to his knees. Through the haze of pain, he saw Hawkins advancing, gun raised. Clara threw herself between them. "No," she cried. "I'll come quietly. I'll sign whatever Samuel wants. Just let him live." "Noble," Hawkins sneered. "But too late." The gunshot was impossibly loud in the confined space, but it was Hawkins who staggered, looking down in shock at the spreading red stain on his chest. He toppled forward, revealing Tom Garrett standing in the passage, smoking rifle in hand. "Cavalry's here," Tom said grimly. Behind him, more men appeared, federal marshals by their badges. Jake Sullivan, Clara Morrison. The lead marshal was a grizzled veteran with keen eyes. "I'm Marshal Coleman. We need to talk." An hour later, they sat in the marshal's temporary camp, Jake's shoulder bandaged. Clara pressed close to his side. The surviving attackers were in chains, including a thoroughly cowed Samuel Morrison. "Interesting wire I got from Kansas yesterday," Coleman said, producing a telegram. "From a Judge William Thornton. Says he's been investigating irregularities in the Morrison estate, found evidence of embezzlement, forged documents, false accusations. Seems Mr. Samuel Morrison here has been a very bad boy." Samuel's face had gone gray. "I want a lawyer." "You'll get one," Coleman assured him. "Back in Kansas, where you'll stand trial for fraud, theft, and conspiracy to commit murder." He turned to Clara. "Ma'am, you're no longer wanted for anything. In fact, Judge Thornton says you're owed considerable restitution." Clara sagged against Jake, tears flowing freely. "It's over, really over." "Really over," Coleman confirmed. "Though I am curious about one thing. Tom Garrett here says you two were planning to get married?" That true? Jake and Clara looked at each other, a whole conversation in a glance. True, Jake said firmly. Well then, Coleman smiled. I'm authorized to perform marriages in the territories. Seems the least I can do after what you've been through. That is, if you're interested. Clara's face lit up despite tear tracks and trail dust. Here now. Unless you'd prefer to wait for a church and proper dress. Jake said, Jake Sullivan, we've been shot at, chased across half the territory, and nearly died a dozen times. I'm not waiting another minute. She stood, pulling him up with her. Marshal Coleman, we would be honored. And so, on a ledge overlooking a valley painted gold by the setting sun, with federal marshals and Tom Garrett as witnesses, Jake Sullivan and Clara Morrison spoke vows that had been forged in danger and tempered by devotion. By the authority vested in me by the territory of Nevada, Coleman concluded, I now pronounce you man and wife, Mr. Sullivan. You may kiss your bride. Jake cupped Clara's face gently, mindful of his wounded shoulder. Hello, Mrs. Sullivan. Hello, husband, she whispered, and kissed him as the sun set over their hard-won freedom. Later, as they made camp for the night, their first as legally wed, Clara tended Jake's wound with gentle hands. Not quite the wedding I imagined as a girl, she said. Regrets? Jake asked. Never, she smiled. Though I did always imagine I'd be wearing something other than trail clothes. You're beautiful, Jake said simply. Then, now, always. Tom Garrett approached with a bottle of whiskey. Wedding present, he said. Good for medicinal purposes, too. They shared the bottle, toasting survival and new beginnings. Tomorrow they would continue to California, but now as Jake and Clara Sullivan, free to build the life they'd dreamed of in a trapper's cabin. What will you do now? Coleman asked. If you don't mind my asking. Jake and Clara exchanged glances. Find a place to settle, Jake said. Maybe ranch a little. Live quiet lives. Raise chickens, Clara added with a smile. After what you've been through, quiet sounds perfect. Coleman agreed. As the camp settled for the night, Jake and Clara sat apart, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. Jake's shoulder throbbed, but the pain seemed distant compared to the woman beside him. We made it, Clara said softly. Against all odds, we made it. Together, Jake agreed, pulling her close with his good arm. Just like we promised. She rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Do you think we'll ever have a story to tell our children about how we met? Sure, Jake said. Once upon a time, a brave woman walked into a saloon and met a good man who saved her life. Clara finished. Who saved whose life? Jake asked. Seems to me we saved each other. Clara smiled against his chest. Then that's the story we'll tell. How Jake and Clara Sullivan saved each other and found love on the wild frontier. The fire crackled, sending sparks into the star-filled sky. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote called, but it no longer sounded lonesome. It sounded like freedom, like possibility, like home. Jake Sullivan, gunfighter and drifter, had found his purpose. Clara Sullivan, once lost and running, had found her strength. Together, they'd found something worth more than gold or safety or respectability. They'd found each other. The end. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope Jake and Clara's journey touched your heart as much as it touched mine while sharing it. Where are you listening to this story from? Please leave a comment below. I'd love to connect with listeners from around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel for more authentic frontier tales of love, courage, and redemption. Share your thoughts about Jake and Clara's story in the comments. What was your favorite moment until our next adventure? Keep riding toward your own horizons.